So here we are going into the last lecture on disorders. And again, this is where a intro psychology class does you a little bit of a disservice because we're spending 3 days on disorders. I mean, you could get a PhD in depression or anxiety or schizophrenia or anything else and just studying this. So again, as with any intro course, survey course, we're skipping a rock across the pond. So we're going to just cover this stuff to the level that you have a general understanding of it. And then the last 2 lectures of the course, we'll talk about therapy. And again, you could get a PhD in therapy to become a therapist or whatever. And we're just going to kind of flash over the various types. So today we're going to talk about schizophrenia. We're going to talk about somatoform disorders, dissociative disorders, personality disorders as well, kind of a hodgepodge right here. We're going to cover schizophrenia because for those of you guys taking AP psychology, I don't know why the people at the College Board love to ask questions about schizophrenia. All right, so this falls under the realm of what is a psychosis. So a psychosis is a psychotic disorder marked by irrationality and a lack of contact with reality. Somebody who's hearing voices, seeing images that other people don't see. And again, folks, we all hear voices. All of us hear voices. And I know that when I say that, some of you are saying to yourself, I don't hear voices. That's your little voice. Okay, we all have the voice inside our head that tells us, do that, don't do that. Why are they doing that? I want to hit that person, whatever. We all have voices in our heads. We can all see images that other people don't see. I just sit here, close my eyes, and it's like, oh, there's the Bahamas. You know, I can see that. But when it comes to a psychosis, you can't tell the difference between the voice in your head and the voice right next to you. When it comes to a psychosis, I can't tell the difference between this phone and the picture on this phone of a skunk and a real skunk or something else. You know, it's taking in sensations that other people aren't. People that suffer from psychoses are more likely to act withdrawn and feel a disconnect because they're experiencing a world that not everybody else is. And if everybody else is experiencing a different world from me, I don't want to deal with these people because I don't want to be reminded of that. So again, this is a true disorder that happens. About 4% of the US population has some sort of a psychosis. And you can see some more stuff there to give you more of an idea of it if you want to take some time to read that. All right, now, when it comes to psychoses, kind of the one that is thought of the most is schizophrenia, which hits about 1% of the population. Now, here's where a lot of people get schizophrenia wrong. They go, oh, she acts this way, then she acts that way, then she acts this way. She's so schizophrenic. That's not schizophrenic. That's a multiple personality that you're trying to go with. And even that's misdiagnosed by you. Schizophrenia, you do not have multiple personalities. Okay, schizophrenia is a split mind, but it's a split from reality. You have a personality, but it's just your personality dealing with the world is different than others. If depression's the common cold, schizophrenia is the cancer of disorders. It tends to strike people as young adults between 16 and 30 years of age. Past the age of 40, only about 10% of people will experience that. Men and women at the same rate. If you have it in your immediate family member, you're 10 times more likely to develop it. If an identical twin has it, you got a 50% chance of developing it as well. And when I say 10 times more likely, it means you have a 10% chance as opposed to the 1% chance of the general population. So it is largely genetic in that. Now, characteristics of people who have schizophrenia. Let me go back here real quick and let me explain my personal connection to schizophrenia. I have a friend. His name's Todd. Todd goes by the name Mookie because it's a nickname we gave him, center fielder for the New York Mets, Mookie Wilson. Mook is a great guy. I've known Mook since I was a teenager and I first moved down to Houston. I used to play basketball up at the rec center. Mook would come up there and play ball. He's about 5-6 years older than me. So I was in my teens. He was in his early 20s. Great guy, cool guy, great outside shot. Always wore these green Chuck Taylors. everything else. I would start to go off to college, 86, 87. And each time that I came back, so now he's kind of in his mid-20s, Todd was acting a little bit different, a little bit more aloof, and was starting to just be off a little bit. And later on, we will discover that Todd has schizophrenia. And I'm going to use Todd as an example here and his schizophrenia. And please don't think that I'm thinking light of him. Okay, he's a great guy. He's a good guy. But he has trouble adapting because of his schizophrenia. Now, that doesn't happen with all people. Some people can have schizophrenia and lead, normal, happy lives as long as taking medication and whatnot. And Todd can't do that. But people go, well, he's kind of eccentric. He's schizophrenic. There's a difference there. And a couple of the characteristics of someone with schizophrenia is, one is hallucination. And a hallucination is a split from reality. Okay. People are experiencing a world I'm not experiencing. This can include hearing voices. But the voices you hear are almost always aggressive and abusive in the voices. You feel things that other people aren't feeling, little tactile sensations. You see things that other people aren't seeing, smells that other people aren't picking up. This is when, again, and we all hear voices and sounds, and sometimes can feel our shirt on, whatever, but it's the dream breaking into the waking consciousness. That's what you're talking about with hallucination. So a lot of times when you see that homeless person walking down the street talking to himself, odds are schizophrenia, which, by the way, is kind of harder to determine now because everybody with their little earbuds talking on their phone and having conversations. I see so many people just walking through the mall, just having a conversation. And you got to question yourself, are they okay? Just sort of having a conversation. So again, know that the voice, when they talk with schizophrenics, when they're talking out loud to themselves, it's usually very aggressive, violent stuff because the voices that they're hearing are almost always abusive. Now, here's what's interesting. No person who has been born blind has ever been diagnosed with schizophrenia, because that idea of being able to see things that aren't there, you can't see things anyways when you're blind. So you don't have that occipital lobe that you can suddenly cause stimulation to. Yet, half of deaf people with schizophrenia report hearing quote unquote voices or sounds or things like that aren't obviously being taken in, are there. So that's kind of an unusual little thing there. Now, the other side of schizophrenia is something called a delusion. And a delusion is basically beliefs that have no basis in reality. Delusions of persecution. Everybody's out to get me. You got to watch out. The government is listening to every one of your conversations. It makes it very difficult to trust other people. And again, a lot of these delusions of persecution, a lot of times, not a lot of all of them, but many schizophrenics get online and they are in that conspiracy theory bubble of QAnon and whatever else, because that kind of goes into their beliefs of paranoia, got to watch out. It really plays towards their illness. Also, delusions of grandeur, thinking that you're more important than who you are. You have more power than necessarily what you do. Believing that you're God or Jesus or whatever, but it's usually somebody of great power. Now, interesting thing about this, my friend Mook never said that he was God or Jesus or anything else like that, but he said he did have a connection to a God, which wasn't a Christian God or anything else like that. And I remember one day I was home for college, and I was having a conversation with Mook in my backyard. And I'm like, really? So you're part of, tell me about this religion. And here's the amazing thing about it. And I know he's sick. I knew he was sick at this time, but me being a cocky 20-something-year-old guy, I'm going, I'll break him and prove to him that he's not. So I asked him all these questions about his religion and his faith and his belief and the origins and whatnot. And it was like a 5-6 hour conversation. And he had answers for everything. For everything. He had perfect answers that made complete sense And as the sun was coming up the next morning and he's just giving me all this stuff, there was part of me thinking, I'd start a cult for this guy, because it just really seemed to make sense. It's kind of appealing too, but it just really seemed to, it's not, and it just proves he's not BSing. It's something that he truly interiorly felt was real. Okay, so again, delusions and hallucinations, kind of the difference between the two. Now, again, how do we know the difference between a hallucination and a delusion? A hallucination is someone going, oh, I can see over there, I see the image of Jesus. The delusion is, I am Jesus. You know, that's kind of the difference between the two. And most people with schizophrenia have a little bit of both there. A lot of times, inappropriate emotions and actions, laughing when there's no reason to laugh, like at a funeral. And folks, I'll laugh at a funeral. It's how I get through and I deal with things, but not inappropriately and loud and stuff like that. Sometimes it can be a flat effect where it's zombie-like and you have no reactions. Sometimes, again, catatonic as well. You could constantly rock back and forth. So again, there's these sort of experiences that they're having that don't fit into society. And so people with schizophrenia have positive as well as negative symptoms. Now, again, positive and negative doesn't mean good or bad. Positive just means things that you have added to, and negative means things taken away. So positive symptoms would be excessive behavior, hallucinations, disorganized delusional talk, inappropriate laughter, tears, rage, extra things they have. Negative symptoms would be the tone is taken out of their voice, the expression is taken out of their face, they become mute, they don't talk. So again, there's a lot of different characteristics for someone who's schizophrenic. Two different levels of schizophrenia. Chronic means that it slowly develops over time, and the tragedy, and this is Mook, that it slowly developed over time is that it's harder to unravel, because it kind of wraps itself out. Acute means that the schizophrenia showed up due to a specific stressor. So if that's the sort of root of your schizophrenia, which means that it was less biological and more environmental, recovery is much more likely. There are subtypes of schizophrenia, you don't have to worry about these, but just to know that they're not all the same. Again, paranoia, believe that you're being followed, usually by famous people. And again, that's also when you hear these stories of, you know, let's say I just read a story the other day of Taylor Swift had someone breaking into her apartment or something. Usually these are people who go, well, but she's my wife. And when she sings, she's talking to me and all these other things. A lot of times these stalkers and stuff like that believe they have a relationship with celebrities that they don't have tend to be schizophrenic as well. Catatonic, mirror the actions of others, disorganized, unable to match the appropriate emotion, undifferentiated, doesn't fall into any category, and residual is when you got a little bit of it kind of left over there. All right. Now, why do people suffer from schizophrenia? Some of it's just the way that the brain is racked up. Low activity in the frontal lobe, because logic isn't really used that much. The thalamus is smaller than normal, which may explain the difficulty in sensing normal inputs. Low birth weight can cause this. There's a lot of studies of the Dutch during the war with the Nazis of women who were pregnant but couldn't eat, and then they had malnourished babies. Those babies, not overwhelmingly, but in greater numbers than normal, developed schizophrenia. Dopamine overactivity. Research has discovered 4 times the normal level of receptors for dopamine in schizophrenics as with the normal population. Drugs that block these receptors can lessen these symptoms. So this may explain overreaction to internal and external stimuli. But again, this is the trick. So you go, oh, well, if you're schizophrenic, here's medication for you. So that will help, right? Well, if I'm someone who is paranoid about the government and people trying to control me and this, that, or the other, am I going to take my medication? You know, this is always, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about medication and whatnot. I'm a healthy person. Well, okay, but mentally I'm a healthy person. I have trouble taking 1 vitamin a day. You know, those 1 a day vitamins, just taking 1 of those guys a day. I have difficulty keeping up with that, you know, or the idea of blood pressure medication. You know, I was taking my blood pressure medication, my blood pressure went down, I felt better, I stopped taking it. I should keep taking it, you know, because my body's adjusting to it or whatever else. And again, I know all this. I teach psychology. I know about medicine and its impact. It's hard for me. So this is always the trouble with prescription medication. We'll talk about that more in 2 more lectures. Again, heritability, any one person getting schizophrenia, you got about a 1% chance, about 4% chance, 4 or 5% chance if it's in some other member of your family tree, 10% chance if it's a parent or sibling, 1 in 6 if it's a fraternal twin, 1 in 2 if it's an identical twin. Now, again, sharing the same placenta goes up to 6 in 10. You know, 1 in 10, it's just like any other sibling. It's that shared placenta, because that placenta, that 9 months, that's DNA and environment combined there. 1 in 50 people with schizophrenia were born in an urban area, separation from parents, poor relationships with friends. These can be contributing factors as well. Excessive drug use. Brian Wilson, who is the founder and lead singer of the Beach Boys, some incredible music. Syd Barrett of Pink Floyd. Both of these guys developed schizophrenia later in their life, largely due to hallucinogenic drug use, acid, etc. These drugs that would cause hallucinations, and then their body sort of got used to producing whatever. So yeah, excessive drug use could be a cause for some of schizophrenia, more of the environmental factors. So some more stuff there on schizophrenia if you want to take a look at it, okay? All right, so let's talk about dissociative disorders, okay? These are where you sort of disassociate from the world and reality and whatnot, characterized by an involuntary escape from reality. Conscious awareness becomes separated from previous memories, thoughts, feelings, whatever we may have. Again, extraordinarily rare, impacts all age, economic, and racial groups. And the symptoms can include memory loss, disconnection from personal identity, disconnect from events of one another. Now, again, some people will argue, is this really a disorder or is it a defense mechanism people are using? You know, I don't want to deal with reality, so I'll pretend I don't remember reality. I don't want to deal with a person, so let me pretend I don't remember this person. So is it a true out-of-body experience, or is it a defense mechanism? Because we all have dissociative moments. We all, our minds all wander to fantasy, whatever. We all have daydreams. We all, you know, forget how we process things. How did I get here? Whatever. But if the disorder is a regular part of your day-to-day life, and again, if it's maladaptive, that's when it becomes a disorder. A couple examples of it here. Psychogenetic amnesia. Okay, this is loss of memory that can't be explained by a car accident. You bumped your head and there's something physically wrong. There's nothing physically wrong with you. You just can't remember specific things. Usually you retain general knowledge. You know your name, you know how to tie your shoes, you know how to drive a car. Usually things that you're forgetting are things that have a sense of harming you. And then you have what is called psychogenetic flag, which combines the amnesia with flight. Very rare, more common in men. It's seen in a lot of guys who get overwhelmed with pressure of work, family, whatnot, and suddenly they just disappear. He just disappeared. And then suddenly, excuse me, he's discovered 5 or 10 years later in Colorado Springs with a new wife, new kid, new whatever. He still remembered how to drive a car, still remembered how to practice law, just forgot he had a kid and a wife. So again, is this truly a disorder or is it a defense mechanism? And so that's where, I mean, again, there are some cases that do show it to be true, but, you know, when we watch Criminal Minds or CSI and see this, a lot of us go, yeah, me too. Is it truly distinguishable from that? And again, this is the end all be all of controversy of dissociative disorders that people love to talk about. Multiple dissociative identity disorder, multiple personalities. Makes a great CSI episode. Makes a great Criminal Minds episode, makes a great Law and Order episode, makes a very interesting movie. Extraordinarily rare, if true at all. Folks, we all have multiple personalities. All of us have multiple personalities. We talked about this before with Hume and personas. You know, when you're around your friends, you act a little bit more immature. When you're around someone else, you do whatever. All right. But this is extraordinarily rare. Haunted, confused personality may represent a defense for you don't want to remember the childhood abuse. You know, we talked about that before. You know, it happened to a kid I knew. We're making up somebody else. You know, a long-term habit of escaping. Most modern cases are very fragmented personalities, which the personality is of the individual, but at different points of their life. You know, here's the 14-year-old me, here's the 32-year-old me, here's the 7-year-old me. You know, some cases of dissociative identity disorder have shown personalities with different sensory abilities or handedness, which is strange, you know, but a lot of people think that critics are just looking for an escape of responsibilities. You know, if you're a critic of this, let's say I'm a critic of it. And so someone goes, well, I got multiple personalities, you know, and a lot of times the people who claim to have this, by the way, are people who did something bad. And they go, I didn't do it. My little personality, Susie, did it. I have this little 22-year-old girl in me who sometimes takes over and she does bad things. And then sometimes it's a 7-year-old little boy named Stevie that takes over. Sometimes it's a 72-year-old Jewish man named Saul who takes over. And again, a lot of times when people are saying this, it's because they don't want to take responsibilities for actions. It's like, I didn't murder him. Susie murdered him. Well, you and Susie both need to go to jail then. Because it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. Because again, let's say there's a 22-year-old girl named Susie in me that occasionally takes over, right? Right? Okay, fine. Well, I'm 53. So when I was 33, she must have been 2, right? If I'm getting older, she needs to get older too. And by the way, when I was born, how was I already a 20-year-old Jewish guy, you know, who would later on become this elderly Jewish guy? Why don't these personalities all continue to age? And that's why most modern cases are fragmented. It's me as a 12-year-old, me as a 7-year-old, but still that's kind of an escaping sort of thing. All right. A lot of times people just want to get away from things. A lot of times it's because of trauma that happened to us that we don't want to deal with, that happened to somebody else, whatever. So a lot of times when I see this, I think it's complete BS, it's complete bullcrap. But then you read an occasional story. I was reading this one medical journal of this guy in, let's say it was Germany. Let's say it was a guy in Germany. I don't know where he was from. It's somewhere in Europe. That claimed that he had multiple personalities. And he claimed that one of his personalities was blind, couldn't see. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. Okay, Tommy's taking over. I can't see, whatever. But they actually hooked his brain up. They hooked his brain up and they did a scan of his brain while he went through these different personalities, and they saw differences in his brain functioning. Not only that, but when they go, let's talk to the personality Tommy, who's blind. Okay, Tommy, let Tommy take it. And Tommy took over. And when Tommy took over in this particular patient, his occipital lobe, responsible for vision, went dark. You can't make your brain go dark. As a matter of fact, some cases of DID have shown personalities with different sensory abilities. Some can play the piano, some can't. Some are left-handed, some are right-handed. Well, now we're starting, maybe we've got something here, you know. But again, we see it in the news, we hear a story, and that's where, you know, all the cases combined from 1874 to let me go back here. From 1874 to 1920, there were 28 cases. From 1921 to 1970, there were 8 cases. Suddenly, after 1970, 71 to 88, you've got 306. And then by the 90s, you got thousands of them. So why? Why are they taking off? Well, there's a movie. There's a movie that came out in 1976. The movie was called Sybil. So it starred Sally Field. It was on TV. And it was a story of a girl named Sybil who had such a traumatic childhood that she developed 16 unique personalities. And this was like a 2-part series. It was watched by tens of millions of people, and then in reruns and everything else, praised by critics, won several awards, including 4 Emmys, including for Sally Field. And by the way, if you're like, I don't know who Sally Field is, she played the mother in Forrest Gump, also in Smokey and the Bandit. Great movie. A little bit racist, but a great movie. So again, you've got so few cases before that. By 1990, there were 40,000 reported cases because this movie was popular. And then other people started to make other movies and TV shows about it, whatever. Then it comes on daytime programming and people get on Oprah and whatever. Oh yeah, I got that too. I got it too. So again, it shows you sort of the social cognitive impact there of personality. Ironically, the story of Sybil was a lie, and it was finally exposed in 2011. Shirley Mason, whom the book was based on, Shirley Mason was Sybil. Okay, she did have a traumatic childhood, no doubt about it. Faced various forms of abuse, no doubt about it. Had many psychological issues, no doubt about it. So she was assigned to this therapist named Dr. Wilbur in the 1950s. Okay, and she really liked Dr. Wilbur, but she felt like Dr. Wilbur just kind of didn't pay a lot of attention to her. But what she discovered was that Dr. Wilbur was really into dissociative identity disorders. That was kind of her interest. So knowing this, Shirley started to make up personalities, because when she knew if she made up personalities, it would get the attention of the doctor, and boy, did it. The doctor became very interested in Shirley, very interested in her personalities and discoveries. And she wrote books about Shirley and made huge profits from Shirley, took Shirley on the lecture circuit with her, because this is my prime case of multiple personalities, which was a lie. And when Shirley admitted to the doctor that it was fake in like the 80s, the doctor ignored it. The doctor said, oh, you're just pretending it is because you're not well and everything else. And the doctor knew that if she would accept that it was fake, then there went the book deals and everything else. It was faked. It was fake because Shirley was a sick girl. And this was her way of getting attention. This was a way of getting attention. So again, multiple personalities that make fascinating movies, fascinating stories, but the reality of it being true. You know, Superman's a pretty good character in a movie, but how many of us can fly? You know, so we got to kind of take this into account, have a little bit of skepticism, but also humility. Because again, there's that guy, one of his personalities is blind in Germany or somewhere over there. I don't know. Okay, somatoform disorders. This is where we experience a physical problem, but there's no physical symptom for this particular problem. Remember, the somatic nervous system controls voluntary muscle movement, but this is when someone suddenly has like a paralysis and there's nothing there, or a pain or an ache and there's nothing there. This isn't to be confused with hypochondria. Hypochondriac is someone who just feels sick, but there's no real symptoms for feeling sick. These are people with physical pains. All right. Now, why would I have this? Well, according to psychodynamic and psychoanalytic theory of this, here's why you would do it. Let's say that my wife decided she wanted a divorce. I don't know why I keep using that example, but let's say that she wanted a divorce and I can't handle it and my marriage is falling apart, and my life is falling apart, and all these other things are falling apart. And then suddenly I go, oh, ow, my knee, my ankle, it hurts. I can't move my knee. I can't move my ankle. So I wrap it up and I show up to school in crutches. I show up to school in crutches. What's the first thing you're going to ask me? Hey, what happened to your ankle? What happened to your knee? You're going to ask me about my marriage? No. The rest of my life? No. You're going to focus on that. And I want to focus on that. I'll focus on my ankle because that's real pain. I can see that. I can feel that. I can't handle the other things that are going on with me. So what we do is we convert our problems from the real problems they are, and we displace them on to sort of a made up physical problem that's not there. The little boy, mommy, I have a tummy ache. I can't go to school. He's being bullied. Now, again, he may really feel a tummy ache, but there's nothing physically wrong with him. It's a conversion disorder. All right. So now let's talk about personality disorders. This is a little bit confusing. And the reason it's a little bit confusing because there's a big difference between a personality trait and a personality disorder. Okay. Again, a personality disorder is when your personality traits are inflexible, disruptive, they impair your ability to go about your day-to-day life. And that is the key. It gets in the way of your day-to-day life. Personality disorders are unique because they are egosynotic, meaning that the person suffering from it doesn't necessarily feel that they have a problem. A narcissist doesn't have a problem being a narcissist. You know, it's working for them fine. You have the problem because you can't deal with it. So that's where it kind of becomes an issue. In general, they are diagnosed in 40 to 60% of psychiatric patients. Not 40 to 60% of the population, 40 to 60% of the people of psychiatric patients. And a lot of times, a personality disorder is sort of tacked onto other problems you have. You have anxiety and this personality disorder. You have this as well as this. You know, typically recognized in later adolescence or early adulthood, rarely recognized in childhood, because again, some of these are just traits of being a kid. Many researchers argue that they overlap one another so much it's hard to diagnose one from another. And again, we all have personality characteristics of various disorders, but we got to be careful about labeling someone that they have a disorder. Someone acting like a narcissist does not necessarily have narcissistic personality disorder. They just have this extreme form of confidence. And that's why they're always on social media and always posting about everything that they do. Look, I'm important. It's not getting in the way of your day-to-day life. So it's not necessarily narcissistic personality disorder. You know, a newborn cannot eat on their own, cannot go to the bathroom and clean up after themselves. They don't have a job. They can't pay the rent, but they're 2. That's what a 2-year-old does. I don't want to look at a 2-year-old and go, what? You can't get a job? What do you got? Some sort of dependent personality disorder? Can't do anything without anyone else? No, because he's 2. All right. So again, we've got to watch out for how we're defining personality disorders. And again, we go with the big 5, the canoe, the ocean, whatever you want to call it. These extremely highs or extremely low versions. That's when we start to see a little bit with disorders. So the DSM-5 identifies 10 personality disorders that fall into 3 specific clusters. Cluster A is odd or eccentric personality characteristics. These include paranoid personality. Okay, so this is like someone who's schizophrenic, but doesn't have the hallucinations. Okay, high levels of suspiciousness of the motives and intentions of others. Everything is a conspiracy. And again, we've got a lot of people that, you know, you start to get into those conspiracy theories can sort of lead to a paranoia. You can't trust anyone in the government. Oh, everyone's out to get you. Oh, watch out what's in that, because the government's got a thing in there and it's a microchip and it goes into your brain. They can tell where you are all the time. Man, don't put your phone down. Don't let people follow you. Don't let the app follow you because they just want to know where you are. And that's a paranoid personality. Now, again, we can all have some paranoia. We can all have some paranoia. Oh my God, my earlobes are fat. We can all have paranoia, but my fat earlobes, now I'm worried about them. Yeah, a little flubby there. Now, that's not going to stop me from going about my day-to-day life. Okay. So we can have a little bit of paranoia, but as long as it doesn't disrupt you, now you go, oh, I can't take that job because if I take that job, they're going to want to watch me and know where I am all the time. That's when it becomes a disorder. Schizoid, aloof, distant from others, shallow, blunt emotions, eccentric behavior, social disengagement. A lot of people are schizoid. You know, you have that one person who just says it how it is. Well, I'm blunt and I just say how I feel. You don't just say how you feel all the time, but, you know, some people are just blunt and rude, you know, and that's one thing to have that as a trait. But when you're always telling people how you feel, you can't work for a boss because you can't keep your mouth shut about how you feel, then that's becoming a disorder. Schizotypal personality is interpersonality difficulties, social anxiety, odd thoughts, appearances, behaviors with others. All those fall under cluster A. Cluster C, avoidant. Anxious, fearful, or avoidant characteristics. Avoidant personality is a pattern of avoiding relationships. I don't want to start this new job because they'll fire me. I don't want to have any friends because my friends will leave me. I don't want to get into a relationship because we'll break up one day. Well, then you're never going to get involved. So again, you're either completely avoid them or you get within cluster C, dependent relationships. You know, you get in that relationship, you can't do anything without them. I don't know. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? I don't know. What classes should I take? You tell me what I should take, because you're always fearful of disappointing others. And you're always fearful of the responsibility of a decision. Now, again, a lot of us can have trouble making decisions, but we get past it. We bite the bullet, we make it. Doesn't get in the way of our day-to-day lives. OCD can also fall under cluster C, though it's debatable whether OCD is a personality disorder versus just more of a physical thing, a compulsive thing. Cluster B is dramatic, emotional, or impulsive traits. Dramatic, emotional, or impulsive traits. Histrionic, dramatic and emotional behavior. Excessive demands to be the center of attention. Excessive need of praise and approval. Likes risks and dangers. Well, this would be everybody who's in the drama club, wouldn't it? This would be everybody who's an actor. This would be pretty much everyone who has a social media account. You know, the excessive demands to be the center of attention. I've posted it. Tell me that you like it, you know, and taking risks, taking dangers, because those risks and dangers are going to give you attention. Adrenaline junkie can fall along that. Also falling in cluster B is the narcissistic personality, grandiose self-image, excessive need for admiration, exaggerated self-importance by successful fantasies, a sense of entitlement. 6% of the population, 50% more likely in men, more common amongst people who are young, because when you're young, you can be narcissistic. Unmarried, separated, or divorced. You could be unmarried, separated, or divorced because of your narcissism. Again, as we said before, hard to diagnose to be a disorder because the person going through it has to find it distressing to their lives. But the person who's a narcissist doesn't see anything wrong in their life. Borderline. A failure to develop a stable self-image together with a pattern of tumultuous moods and stormy relationships with others, along with a lack of impulse control. Let me repeat that. A failure to develop a stable self-image together with a pattern of tumultuous moods and stormy relationships with others, along with a lack of impulse control. Well, now, if that doesn't sound like every teenager I've ever met in my life, trying to figure out your identity. Tumult can be moody because of all these new hormones that are coming into you. Stormy relationships. Can I trust that friend? Can I trust that friend? What's my relationship with my parents now? Lack of impulse control, no frontal lobe. Very intense emotions, unstable sense of self. And again, that's fine when you're 15. That's kind of normal behavior when you're 15. You're 35, and suddenly you're quitting your job, and you can't stay in a relationship, and you're yelling at your family for no reason. Then that's where it can go. You're going from one thing to the other. You're constantly crossing that borderline. You use but here's the key, because I know a lot of people may know someone, especially younger people, whose doctors have diagnosed them with borderline personality. I'm not saying that everything with borderline, I'm not saying every teenager is a borderline personality, because borderline personality also has dysfunctional and unhealthy means to deal with challenging situations. Usually, teenagers can have all those characteristics, but then you use proper ways to deal with them. But when you use dysfunctional, unhealthy means, outbursts of rage, self-harm for attention, things like that, to deal with challenging situations and also non-challenging situations, because you're a little bit up there with the histrionic, trying to get attention. So, and again, this is where it gets to be a little bit of a problem of these personality disorders sort of blur into one another. Now, speaking of CSI, the antisocial personality disorder. This is the one that makes a good criminal in a Marvel movie or whatever. This is a person that exhibits a lack of consciousness or wrongdoing, lack of empathy, even towards friends and family members, little regret. They can't see anybody else's viewpoint. It could be aggressive, could be ruthless. This lack of conscience becomes clear by 15 years of age. This is the person who, is killing pets because they want to watch it die, whatever. That's pretty obvious early on. I'm not talking about this 8-year-old, 10-year-old kid who goes hunting with his father. I'm just talking about really lack of frontal lobe thing, lack of seeing right versus wrong, lack of pain receptors. These are the kids that you can't really punish because it doesn't register to them, unable to keep a job, spouse, family, things like that. Again, less activity in the frontal lobe. Violent repeat offenders are shown to have 11% less tissue in the prefrontal cortex than the average person. Children with lower than normal response to fearful things, as well as punishment, which makes it harder to punish them. Overly reactive dopamine reward system, need for constant stimulation and an immediate reward system, addicted to bad behavior, because when you do something bad and you get that reward of dopamine, you need the next hit. So you keep doing the bad things and you don't even realize that they're bad things. You know, the person with the antisocial personality disorder, this is the guy who will steal your girlfriend and then invite you to the wedding and expect a gift. You're like, why? Why should I come in? You broke my heart. You know, why? It's so wrong. Why would you do that? You're like, yeah, I don't care. You should have kept her. You couldn't keep her. I did. You lose. I'm going to break her heart in 10 years. Maybe you pick up the pieces then. You're only in it for you. Antisocial personality, you're only in it for you. 5 to 6% of offenders commit 50 to 60% of all crimes. Not every criminal has antisocial personality disorder. It's only about 4 or 5% of the population. 50 to 60% of all crimes are committed by 5 to 6% of criminals. Those are your repeat offenders. You know, most people, you get arrested, you go to jail for a little bit of time, you go, you know what? That sucked. Ain't doing that anymore. You know, I got arrested once, went to jail for a night. That wasn't fun. You know, we're going to need your belt and shoelaces so you don't use them as a weapon or to kill yourself over the next few hours. What? You know, it's most people. You don't do that again. But the person with the antisocial personality disorder, they're the person who goes to jail. They get out the next day and go, oh, I'm short on cash. Where's that liquor store I can rob? It's the repeat offender. And again, we're going to talk about the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. And a lot of it has to do with blue collar crime versus white collar crime. Blue collar crime is the carjacker. Blue collar crime is the one who breaks into your house. Blue collar crime is the person who takes your wallet, robs the grocery store, things like that. Takes out the 7-Eleven liquor store, whatever. All right, that's blue collar crime, violent crime. White collar crime is the guy who's sitting in the office and draining your savings account, who's got the Ponzi scheme, the pyramid scheme, where it says that you have money, but you don't really have money and they're taking it from you. The business manager that, you know, robs you blind on certain things. The contractor that doesn't use the materials that he said he was going to use so we can skim all this off the top. Those are the two different types of crime. Now, most of us are more fearful of violent crime because we think that could happen to us at any point. 2014, the total cost of all violent crime committed was $18 billion. In 2014, in the United States, there was a total of $18 billion of violent crime. Carjacking to all those stuff added up, home robberies, all added up, came out to about $18 billion. That's a lot of money. But white collar criminals, the people who do the stock market fraud and everything else, you think it's the same, less, or more? 300 billion. And here's the weird thing about white collar criminals. We like them. We're like, oh, I would do that too. Oh, you didn't pay your taxes? I'd like to not pay my taxes. We identify with these people a little bit more. We're a little bit more empathetic towards these people. You know, oh, you just got to learn how to play the system. You're breaking a law. You know, and when you're stealing from people's retirement savings, well, no one's bleeding. Yeah, but they've lost all their money. These are bigger hits. And this tends to be the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. And we'll talk about that in a second. Now, a main tool of gaslighters is a main tool of antisocial personality disorder is gaslighting. This is a tool used to control other people. And you say it, again, narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths will all use this to manipulate and abuse other people. You know, when they did something, to say, I didn't do that, will lie to your face. They will lie to your face. And you're not going to be able to detect it on a lie detector because there's no increase in their pulse. There's no sweating. There's no eyes moving around. They will lie at you like it's the truth and have no problem with that. You're overreacting. You're getting upset over nothing. Blatant lying or cover-ups, denying conversations ever occurred, contradicting words and actions. Any questioning of these actions is blamed on the victim as being delusional or incompetent. My wife was married to one of these guys for 20 years. 20 years. She still has a little PTSD from it. And they would get into arguments, and everything that she would say, somehow he could bring it around and turn it on her and make it seem like it was her fault. And she went through this for 20 years because she wanted to keep the family and the kids together and everything else. And I just got to make the best of it. But this guy was basically controlling her because, you know, saying, well, you're difficult. No one will have you. You're all these problems. And as a matter of fact, the straw that broke the camel's back on this, because where she was starting to, because she believed it. She believed what he was saying because, well, maybe I am wrong and maybe I am misremembering these things. And then he'd tell different stories to the kids and the kids thought those were the truth. And she would hear it from the kids and she was just confused by it. One night they were living in Hawaii and she came down to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and in the kitchen was her laptop. And as she came down to the kitchen to get a glass of water, what she discovered was her ex-husband on her laptop changing the words in her journal that she kept online, changing the words in it to get her to doubt herself. But he was doing this as a way to control. Nothing wrong with it. Hey, this is what I got to do to control these things. This is what I'll do. And you start to believe it. You start to believe it. These are other signs of gaslighting right there. All right, so let's talk about what is the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. And again, the DSM-I only calls it an antisocial personality disorder because they think the word psychopath and sociopaths are not necessarily politically correct. The irony of all ironies there is if you're a psychopath or sociopath, you really don't give a crap what anybody's calling you anyway. So why we got to be nice, I don't know. All right, now, psychopath versus sociopath. The antisocial personality disorder is more likely genetic in a psychopath. It's more likely I'm getting this DNA from my family. Sociopath, more likely to learn it from the environment. So psycho, in my brain, socio, what I'm experiencing. Psychopaths don't have a lot of personal attachments, harder time forming true bonds. People that they do form relationships with, they're forming those relationships with them so that they can get something from them later. Have the trophy wife, because that trophy wife is going to give me status, whatnot. And this may explain why their harming of others is more extreme. These psychopaths tend to be serial killers and things like that. Not that all psychopaths are serial killers. Serial killers tend to be psychopaths. Let's go that direction. Highly manipulative behavior, easy liars and things like that. Sociopath is more erratic and impulsive behavior. Okay, they don't think it out very well. Again, the psychopath, you're my mark. I'm going to get to know you because when I get to know you, then I'm going to be able to take this from you, use this from you, and then get all these different things from you. And that's a psychopath. Psychopath is long and planned out. The sociopath is a guy you bump into in a bar and you go, oh, excuse me, dude, you want to go? You want to go? Let's go. You want to go? Let's go. You know, he's not thinking, hey, I don't know this guy. I go on for the rest of my life. He's just like, this guy hit me. I got to take him out now. I don't care if I could go to jail. That's a sociopath, very impulsive in their behavior. Psychopaths tend to be educated, white collar criminals. And again, get to know you, get access to your bank accounts, things like that. Sociopaths tend to be less educated. These are the blue collar criminals. And again, this is the guy that can carjack you, not thinking, you know what, I'm taking away this guy's car and he's not going to be able to have family. And dude, I just want the car. You know, it's very impulsive stuff that happens with a sociopath, which is why sociopaths tend to go to jail more because they tend to get discovered more. Psychopaths, calculated risk, leave little evidence. Sociopath leaves a lot of clues because their actions are very spontaneous. Psychopath sees nothing wrong with their actions. Hey, should have never given me your money. Hey, you should have held on to your girl. What did I tell you? What? Whatever. It's your problem. It's your problem. It ain't my problem. It's not my problem. You get a lot from a psychopath. It ain't my problem. Sociopath does realize that their behavior was wrong by society, but they'll rationalize it. Yeah, but I needed the car. Yeah, but they got me right. Yeah, he's got insurance anyways. That'll take care of it. The sociopath will rationalize. And again, psychopaths are about 1% of the general population. Sociopaths are about 4%. So why do you become this? Well, studies show, they studied 400 men between the ages of 20 and 22, and they discovered that people with antisocial personality behavior had biological risk factors at birth, came from impoverished families as well. So again, you're a little kid, and mom and dad promise you stuff for Christmas and you never get it. Well, you were lied to, but hey, I got you to behave. You know, lying got you to do these particular things. So you sort of learn this. Also, less frontal lobe behavior. Most of us aren't going to hurt someone because we have those mirror neurons. Oh, it causes you pain. Ooh, sorry. Murderer, sociopath, psychopath, doesn't see it. Oh, well, I killed you. You're out of my way now. Don't have to deal with you anymore. That's that behavior. Okay. Other things there on personality disorders, more stuff if you want to take a look at it, a little bit more on narcissism, borderline, psychopaths versus sociopaths there, and a lot of stuff there on personality disorders if you ever want to hit cause. That wraps up disorders. Next 2 lectures, we're going to talk about, now that we've talked about how broken we are, let's talk about fixing it next. 2 more lectures to go. This class is over.